In 2023, a railway expansion near Nordhausen, Germany, exposed a sealed chamber buried beneath decades of post-war infrastructure. Workers reported a stench of oil and ozone before finding an iron hatch stamped with the faded insignia of the Waffenamt, the German Army Weapons Agency. Inside were corridors blackened by soot, sealed crates labelled Project Morgenrot, Versuchsanlage 12, and a rusted terminal still wired to an inactive power grid. Local authorities called it a forgotten V2 testing annex. But the initial photographs told a different story: containment tanks, surgical tables, and reels of coded magnetic recordings. Within days, German federal police cordoned off the site, citing biohazard risk, and the files vanished into Bundesarchiv custody. Yet one archivist leaked a single document to an investigative journalist in Berlin, a typed summary from 1944 referencing aeromedical adaptation through oxygen deprivation. What began as a routine excavation had become the reopening of a chapter erased from official war history, and the first trace of an operation the Allies never admitted existed. Chapter 1. The Nordhausen Complex Discovery. The first team to enter the Nordhausen chamber consisted of 6 civil engineers, a geologist from Göttingen University, and 2 Bundeswehr ordnance specialists. According to the incident log filed under reference DEB KM G23-440, entry was authorized for 3 hours to assess potential unexploded munitions. Within 15 minutes, the team encountered a reinforced door bearing the code MGR12. Inside, cameras recorded a narrow corridor ending in a domed room lined with oxidized control panels. One monitor still displayed a partially legible stencil: Morgenrot, Zentrale. Initial readings showed elevated oxygen depletion, forcing the team to retreat. Later chemical analysis confirmed traces of liquid oxygen, ethanol residue, and human biological matter preserved in cryogenic frost. What made the discovery particularly disturbing were the labels etched into the walls. Names, dates, and physiological notations written in German cursive, many followed by the letter R, likely denoting research subjects. Within 48 hours, the Federal Police's Criminal Technisches Institute classified the site as historically sensitive. Decontamination crews in hazmat suits extracted 27 sealed canisters, 2 of which contained preserved tissue samples. Each container bore identical serials: Hatch V12.43 NR 07032. The Bundesarchiv later confirmed those prefixes matched documents from the Heeresversuchsanstalt Peenemünde, the main rocket development center of Nazi Germany. However, there was no public record of any subsite in Nordhausen operating under the Morgenrot code name. Internal memos obtained by investigative journalist Lara Kessler in 2024 revealed that Morgenrot had been redacted from both Allied and Soviet post-war intelligence summaries. One memo, dated May 3, 1945, read simply, "Facility sealed under Operation Eclipse orders. Do not pursue recovery of medical assets." Kessler's investigation led her to the archives of the U.S. National Archives and Records Administration, College Park, Maryland. There she located declassified OSS file Eagle 217B, detailing the transfer of 52 German specialists to American custody in late 1945. Among them, a name appeared that matched scrawled initials found on a Nordhausen clipboard: Dr. H.V. Rademacher. His post-war record listed employment at Wright Field, Ohio, under aeromedical adaptation research. Rademacher's American file ended abruptly in 1953, classified under Air Force Project. A262, Freedom of Information. Requests filed by Kessler were denied on grounds of national security, exemption under Section 1.4a. The denial itself became evidence that the Morgenrot connection had not disappeared. It had been absorbed. By early 2025, drone mapping of the Nordhausen tunnels revealed over 3 kilometers of interlinked passages extending beneath the modern industrial zone. Ground-penetrating radar identified at least 6 sealed chambers, labelled with Greek letters on the surviving wall maps. One chamber, Theta, appeared to contain a large metallic sphere connected to electrical conduits. German historians speculated it could be a hyperbaric testing chamber, possibly for altitude or decompression research. The existence of such advanced infrastructure in 1944 contradicted established timelines of medical technology in the Third Reich. A classified Bundesarchiv briefing to the Bundestag Committee for Cultural Heritage leaked anonymously in December 2024, stated, "Preliminary evidence suggests experimentation on controlled oxygen deprivation as a method of enhancing pilot endurance at extreme altitude. Ethical considerations. Catastrophic." Parallel to the physical investigation, digital archivists began decoding the magnetic wire recordings retrieved from the site. The process took months, requiring restoration by specialists from the Fraunhofer Institute. The recovered audio contained distorted voices, German, English, and occasionally Russian, reciting medical readings, test durations, and stress responses. One segment included a female voice stating, "Versuch 34, test subject unresponsive at -12 minutes. Proceed with variable pressure cycle." The next 10 seconds were silent before the recording abruptly ended with static. Voice analysis indicated the speaker was likely Dr. Rademacher's assistant, Ilse B. Meyer, missing since 1945, and presumed dead during the evacuation of Mittelbau-Dora. Kessler published excerpts of the recovered material in a restricted academic paper titled Anatomy of the Forgotten Program in early 2025. Within weeks, her research website was taken offline by what appeared to be a coordinated cyber intrusion traced to anonymous IPs routed through Virginia and Brussels. The physical copies of her documents disappeared during a break-in at her apartment in Prenzlauer Berg. Investigators found no fingerprints, only an empty film reel labelled MGR-12B. The German police dismissed the incident as an unrelated burglary. Yet 2 days later, an unmarked envelope arrived at Kessler's temporary address containing a single black and white photograph. A group of men in Luftwaffe uniforms standing beside a cylindrical chamber, identical to those found at Nordhausen. Stamped USF Medical Division 1951. As of February 2025, the Nordhausen site remains under federal lock, guarded by the Bundeswehr's 26th Engineering Battalion. Officially, it is a hazardous excavation zone. Unofficially, researchers believe it holds the missing bridge between Nazi medical experimentation and the dawn of Cold War aerospace research. The deeper they dig, the clearer the pattern becomes. Morgenrot was not an isolated wartime aberration, but a foundation stone of something larger, a program reborn under new banners after 1945. The last entry in the facility's surviving logbook reads, "Data secured, transfer authorized, future application classified." No one has yet determined to whom that transfer was made. Chapter 2. The Rademacher Transfer Files. In March 2025, after months of unanswered FOIA requests, Lara Kessler received an unmarked flash drive in her Berlin mailbox. The drive contained a folder labelled RDMC-53 and 214 pages of what appeared to be scanned microfilm. Embedded timestamps suggested the source was an Air Force archive digitized in the early 1990s. The contents detailed the relocation of a group of German scientists from US military installations in 1947 through 1953 under the administrative title Personnel Integration Directive 1284. Among the names was Dr. Heinrich Victor Rademacher, listed as Aviation Medical Consultant, Wright Field, Ohio. His new designation, Project Goliath, High Altitude Physiological Response Program. Page 76 carried a handwritten note in the margin. Morgenrot data fully integrated. Results pending reclassification. The metadata confirmed the document's authenticity. The implication was chilling. Morgenrot had not been buried. It had been exported. Kessler shared the findings with Dr. Emil Hartmann, a retired Bundeswehr physician who had contributed to NATO's Aerospace Medicine Division in the 1970s. When shown the documents, Hartmann recognized several terminologies identical to those used in his early manuals: controlled hypoxic adaptation, neurological latency thresholds, and oxygen modulation through pressurization. He confirmed that many Cold War flight endurance studies in the US and Western Europe derived from data of unknown provenance, euphemism for intelligence captured from Axis research. When asked about Rademacher, Hartmann recalled hearing his name once in 1972 during a classified briefing in Brussels. He was considered a pioneer, but no one said from where he came, only that his work saved astronauts. For Kessler, that statement reframed the Nordhausen discovery entirely. Morgenrot wasn't a dead Nazi experiment. It was the root of modern aerospace physiology. Determined to find corroboration, Kessler contacted journalist Owen Laird from the Washington Sentinel, who had previously exposed declassified Project Paperclip operations. Together, they examined the RDMC-53 scans line by line. Several pages contained redacted budget codes cross-referenced with U.S. Army Air Force's procurement orders from fiscal year 1951. One recurring designation caught Laird's attention: Supply Channel 804, Logistics via Base 801, Greenland. The coordinates corresponded to Thule Air Base, the northernmost American installation of the early Cold War. Satellite imagery revealed an isolated structure near the edge of the ice field, known today as Hangar 7A. Internal memos in the cache mentioned test cells installed within the hangar, equipped for atmospheric pressure simulation. One entry dated February 12, 1952, stated, "Successful application of R model chamber under 5x variable stress, subject mortality within expected parameters." The initials HVR appeared beside it, cross-referencing the file numbers. Laird uncovered a related archive in the US Department of Energy's public records, oddly classified under environmental radiation testing. Inside was a technical report, ENV Alt TH52, authored by Rademacher himself. The language mirrored the Morgenroth transcripts. Exposure cycles under reduced oxygen saturation demonstrate neural persistence beyond baseline tolerance. The document's annex described a subject recovery anomaly during test series number 4, in which a participant reportedly exhibited post-mortem muscular continuity. The phrasing, clinical and cold, suggested an attempt to describe involuntary movement after death. Kessler and Laird's conclusion was stark. The experiments conducted under US auspices directly replicated the physiological trials initiated at Nordhausen. By summer 2025, their investigation attracted discreet attention. Emails began bouncing back with server errors. Phone calls were interrupted by automated disconnects. Then, an encrypted message reached Laird's private account from an anonymous Proton address. It contained one sentence: "Stop before you reach the Denver storage facility." Attached was an image of a declassified cover sheet labeled AFMD Denver Repository, Box 241. The note referenced a rumored military warehouse used to store classified biomedical artifacts. Laird traveled to Colorado under the pretext of interviewing Cold War veterans. 2 weeks later, Kessler received a single voicemail, the sound of static, followed by Laird's voice whispering, "Box 241 is Morgenroth." Then silence. His hotel room in Denver was found empty, personal belongings intact, no signs of struggle. Officially, the case remains open. Unofficially, colleagues in the Sentinel say his computer access logs were wiped the same night. Following Laird's disappearance, Kessler was summoned to an informal meeting with a Bundestag liaison from the Ministry of Defense. The official, who requested anonymity, handed her a printed memo stamped NATO Archive, Confidential. The memo summarized a 1960 transatlantic research initiative known as Project Helios, jointly conducted by US, British and West German laboratories. Its goal: study of sustained consciousness under hypobaric stress environments. The scientific leads listed included names previously connected to Morgenroth and Goliath. Helios ran until 1972, when it was abruptly discontinued. The reason given: unacceptable mortality rate during human trials. Beneath the text, a faint pencil notation read, "All source material originates from Nordhausen databank." The convergence of names, terminology, and research lineage left little doubt. Morgenroth had evolved through successive rebrandings: Goliath, Helios, and possibly further projects yet to be uncovered. Each iteration carried fragments of data extracted from the same dark origin. For Kessler, the question was no longer whether the West had used Nazi research. It was how deeply that knowledge had been institutionalized into modern medicine and aerospace science. The RDMC-53 cache hinted at ethical transgressions that crossed borders and generations. The deeper she looked, the more the timelines blurred between wartime atrocity and post-war innovation. By late 2025, Kessler's publication proposal had been rejected by every major outlet in Europe. Editors cited unverifiable sourcing and potential compromise of national security relationships. The Nordhausen complex remained sealed. The Bundeswehr's 26th Battalion maintained its perimeter, and local authorities prohibited entry under environmental protection laws. Yet new satellite imagery leaked online showed fresh excavation scars leading from the tunnel system toward an area marked as municipal infrastructure. The work had resumed quietly, under the cover of reconstruction. Somewhere below, in darkness and concrete, rested the origins of Project Morgenrot, a legacy too entangled with modern science to erase and too dangerous to fully reveal. Chapter 3. The Thule experiments recovered. The first clue to the existence of the Thule experiments came from a line buried deep within the RDMC-53 documents. Subject testing relocated to 8011 Thule as of November 1951. The reference appeared innocuous until Kessler discovered a forgotten photograph from a 1952 U.S. Air Force bulletin showing technicians in thick Arctic coats standing beside a cylindrical pressure tank, its exterior embossed with the serial MGR-12B. That serial matched one of the canisters recovered from Nordhausen. The connection was undeniable. What had begun as a German wartime experiment in oxygen deprivation had been transplanted intact to the frozen frontiers of Greenland. Kessler's next step was to trace the personnel manifests of Thule Air Base between 1951 and 1954. Several names corresponded to those listed in Rademacher's Project Goliath unit. One in particular, Major Raymond L. Keene, would later surface in congressional hearings concerning human subject experimentation. Using leaked Pentagon procurement archives hosted briefly on a defunct contractor's server, Kessler identified payment transfers under Arctic Medical Facility, contract line 4812G. The expenditure logs itemized materials incongruent with a standard airbase operation: surgical-grade nitrogen tanks, cadaver storage units, and large-volume hypobaric chambers. There was also an entry for transport specimens, origin Nordhausen D, destination Thule, GL, dated December 1947. That shipment took place 2 years before Thule Air Base officially existed. The implication was that the site had functioned under another designation before its public activation, likely as a covert research outpost. Archived U.S. Army Corps of Engineers blueprints supported this theory, revealing a sealed sublevel beneath Hangar 7A, with no listed access route from the surface. A maintenance diagram marked it as Compartment Theta. The same name had been discovered on a subterranean map at Nordhausen. Through contact with a Danish journalist, Anders Lind, Kessler gained access to local government records in Nuuk, where Danish contractors had maintained construction logs for Thule during its early phase. In Box 1952, she found a field report written in Danish by a civil engineer named Erik Nyholm. Dated March 1952, it described a medical annex constructed under American oversight, designed to simulate extreme atmospheric conditions. Nyholm mentioned unusual crates marked with red warning symbols being unloaded from a C-47 cargo plane. He noted that access to the annex required 2 American officers and that foreign personnel were prohibited. 2 months later, Nyholm was found dead near the shoreline. His death ruled accidental hypothermia despite mild temperatures that week. His original report was sealed under bilateral security protocol until its quiet release in 2003, where it remained unnoticed until Kessler uncovered it. To verify the Thule connection, Kessler and Hartmann reached out to the Arctic Research Institute in Tromsø. Using magnetometric data collected during ice core studies, researchers detected residual metallic anomalies roughly 300 meters beneath the old base perimeter, consistent with sealed steel compartments. With permission from Greenlandic authorities, a joint Danish-German expedition deployed remote probes through boreholes in 2025. The cameras captured haunting imagery: corroded corridors, racks of medical instruments, and signage in both German and English. A partially intact control panel displayed the words, "Goliath Chamber. Active status, terminated." Lying nearby was a clipboard still bearing the insignia of the U.S. Air Research Service. Paper within it had frozen solid, but one sentence was visible. Trial 14 concluded. Loss of subject within predicted tolerance range. The frozen pen still rested on the page. When the footage reached Berlin, it was immediately classified by the Bundesministerium der Verteidigung under emergency cooperation orders with the US Department of Defense. But fragments of the data had already circulated through independent networks. A single still image leaked to the press showed what appeared to be a medical stretcher under a broken fluorescent light. The outline of a human figure could be seen, covered in frost. Kessler's informant within the Norwegian Polar Institute confirmed that biological material had been found, human remains preserved by sub-zero temperatures. DNA sequencing, though partial, indicated European origin consistent with mid-20th century genetic profiles. More disturbing was the discovery of a US service tag embedded in the specimen's sleeve. K. Whitmore, AFMD, US Air Force Medical Division. The man on the table wasn't a wartime prisoner. He was an American test subject. Declassified fragments of US Senate Report SR 447, dated 1974, later corroborated the existence of unacknowledged human trials at high-altitude simulation sites in the Arctic. One witness, a technician from Brooks Air Force Base, testified that foreign data had been used in the experiments. The report was sealed before public release. Kessler's reconstructed timeline showed that between 1951 and 1953, 12 subjects underwent experimental oxygen deprivation cycles within Thule's subterranean facility. 9 died, their identities remain classified. What linked them all was a shared medical goal, endurance enhancement for long-duration flight and space travel. Morgenroth's purpose had evolved from human survival under wartime duress to the physiological limits of space exploration. The ethical line had not been erased, it had simply been moved. In a final effort to authenticate her findings, Kessler arranged to meet an anonymous source, a retired US Air Force archivist now living under protection in Reykjavik. His only condition was that no recording devices be used. Over a single night in a hotel near the harbor, he confirmed the existence of Archive Room 9 at the Denver repository, where physical remnants from Thule had been stored since 1960. "You won't find Goliath in history books," he told her. "It's catalogued under environmental medicine, box codes starting with AEC. The files list them as thermal exposure studies, but the photographs tell another story. They show Germans, Americans, and subjects who never volunteered." When asked who authorized the transfer, the man hesitated before replying. "Everything went through the Air Research Service, but it didn't start with us. It started under the mountain." By the end of 2025, the Nordhausen and Thule discoveries had merged into a single narrative, a continuous thread of experimentation spanning continents and decades. Governments offered no comment. The Bundesarchiv placed an embargo on all Morgenroth-related documents until 2085. Yet, within the closed circles of investigative historians, whispers circulated of a missing film reel shot at Thule in 1952, allegedly documenting one of the Goliath trials. If found, it could become the most damning evidence yet that the scientific legacy of the Third Reich not only survived the war, but guided the birth of modern aerospace physiology. The last surviving annotation from Thule's recovered records contained 4 words typed in English. Nordhausen results successfully replicated. Chapter 4. The Denver Repository Revelation. When Kessler arrived in Denver in late January 2026, she carried a single objective: locate Box 241. The Denver Repository, officially named the U.S. Air Force Medical Research Storage Annex, was situated 30 kilometers outside the city limits, within a fenced complex that once belonged to the Atomic Energy Commission. Publicly, it stored Cold War medical research. Privately, it housed archives deemed too sensitive for standard declassification. After weeks of correspondence and false identities, Kessler gained access under the guise of a visiting scholar from the University of Zurich. Inside, fluorescent light hummed across corridors lined with sealed aluminum cases. Each bore coded labels: AFMD Bio, AECTH, ENV Alt. Following the archivist's inventory map, she found Section D4 Environmental Studies, Sublevel 2, and there, wedged between radiation testing logs, was a battered crate, AFMD 241. Its contents would redraw the line between recovered history and deliberate concealment. Inside the crate lay 3 reels of 16mm film, 10 photographic negatives, and a sealed envelope marked Project Helios, Confidential, Auth R23 Clearance. The accompanying log sheet listed the items as transferred from Thule Air Base, Greenland, 1958, via Medical Transport 319. The film reels, labelled Goliath Trials 3 to 5, had been declared lost decades earlier. Using a portable viewer provided by the archive technician, Kessler threaded the first reel through trembling hands. Grainy black and white images flickered to life. A windowless chamber, 2 uniformed officers, and a patient connected to a web of hoses. At the 20-second mark, the frame widened, revealing a wall marked with the Morgenrot emblem, the rising sun over a crosshairs motif identical to that on the Nordhausen vault door. The footage then showed pressure readings escalating, a body convulsing, and technicians calmly noting data. The subject's face was obscured, but the camera panned toward a clipboard bearing the name Subject 11, American Volunteer. Kessler documented every second. Reel 2 contained scenes of calibration tests, including a moment when an operator spoke directly into the microphone. Parameter control for altitude simulation. Minus 42,000 feet equivalent. The voice was clearly American. The third reel ended abruptly with an image of a document stamped Transfer to Wright P. The archivist later confirmed that Wright P referred to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the same facility where Rademacher had once been stationed. The reels established a direct logistical chain. Morgenrot to Goliath to Helios. The experiments were not isolated research initiatives, but an unbroken continuation under evolving oversight. The implication was damning. Post-war American aerospace medicine had advanced through direct human experimentation inherited from Nazi Germany. Within 24 hours, Kessler attempted to copy the reels using the archive's digitization terminal. The system froze mid-transfer. Minutes later, the building's internal alarms triggered, citing an environmental containment alert. Security officers evacuated the facility and escorted all visitors to the surface. Her clearance was revoked. When she returned the next morning, Box 241 was gone. The archivist she had worked with, identified only as Henderson, had been reassigned to a base in Nevada. The access logs for her session were deleted. Only one record remained in the visitor ledger, a handwritten note beside her name. Consulted 241. Removed. Kessler realized she had been watched the entire time. Her rental car was followed on the way back to the city. That evening, an anonymous envelope slid beneath her hotel door, containing a printed still frame from the reel she'd viewed, the one showing the Morgenrot emblem. On the back, in typewritten text, it read, "You saw enough. Leave it buried." Returning to Berlin, Kessler filed a secure report through the European Investigative Network, detailing her findings and including transcribed notes from the reels. Within a week, the network's servers experienced a coordinated intrusion traced to an IP cluster associated with the US Department of Defense. The uploaded files were wiped. Only fragments survived in mirrored archives maintained by independent researchers. Among them was a scanned image of a letter from 1959, addressed to Lieutenant General Charles H. Rhodes, USAF Medical Command. The letter referenced legacy data originating from Operation Morgenrot, adapted for Helios protocol, full integration achieved. It was signed simply HVR. The initials left no ambiguity. Rademacher's signature had appeared once more, 14 years after his official disappearance. The scientist presumed dead in 1953 was alive in the United States, working under military contract. Dr. Hartmann corroborated this after discovering a cross-reference in NATO's 1961 Technical Index. Under Helios 2 Transnational Cooperative Study, an author was listed as H. Victor. The report, archived under Ref. NTS HE2-61, described the use of controlled neurohypoxia to simulate pilot loss of consciousness. It included data tables identical to those recovered from Nordhausen's canisters. Forensic analysts later confirmed numerical sequences matching the HV12.43NR identifiers engraved on the tissue samples from the German site. Morgenrot's fingerprints were present in every phase. Even more disturbing, the report cited voluntary subjects from US, UK, and DE personnel. Historical cross-checking proved that none of the named individuals had military records beyond 1959. Their disappearance was quietly recorded as service. Reallocation. The Denver discovery forced Kessler into hiding. Friends in Berlin noted her increasing paranoia. She claimed her communications were being monitored, and that she'd received anonymous calls repeating a single phrase. Project Helios terminated successfully. In her final verified message to Hartmann, dated February 18, 2026, she wrote, "The reels proved the continuity. They knew the ethics and buried them under ice and bureaucracy. Morgenrot never ended. It evolved." Days later, her apartment was found ransacked, her computer destroyed, and all research notes missing. Police labeled it a burglary. Hartmann refused the explanation. He later stated in an interview, She was silenced not because she found something new, but because she proved the old truth never stopped. Today, no trace of Box 241 remains in any known US inventory. The Air Force archives list it as destroyed, document control error, 1989. Yet occasional classified leaks hint otherwise. A 2027 intelligence brief circulated within the European Defence Agency referenced a legacy physiological chamber retrieved from storage in Nevada for private sector aerospace testing. Its codename, Morgenrot X, the ghost of a program once born beneath the mountains of Nordhausen, now resurfaced beneath the guise of innovation. Whether Kessler survived to see that headline remains unknown. What endures is her last written note, recovered from a hidden drive. The line between science and morality was crossed once, in the dark. The question is not if it happened again, but how many times since. Chapter 5. The Morgenrot Continuum Exposed. In March 2027, a year after Lara Kessler vanished, an anonymous upload appeared on an encrypted European research forum known as ArchiveNet. The file, titled continuum.mgr.zip, contained digital copies of documents previously unseen in any archive. Embedded EXIF metadata traced the scans to an internal US Department of Defense network, time-stamped February 14, 2026, 4 days before Kessler's last known message. Among the files was a 47-page memorandum labeled Continuum Integration Program Directive, MGR Con 76. The document outlined a post-war scientific lineage that read like a genealogy of secret projects. Morgenrot, 1943-45, Goliath, 1947-53, Helios, 1959-72, and Continuum, 1991-present. Each name represented a generational evolution of the same physiological objective, to extend human survivability beyond natural hypoxic limits. The final section bore a familiar signature, Supervising Consultant, H. Victor. If authentic, Rademacher, or someone assuming his identity, had been active decades after his presumed death. Investigators across Europe and the US attempted to trace the upload's origin, but the file replicated itself across private academic servers before deletion. Independent experts from the University of Oslo and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology verified that the technical language within the Continuum Directive matched the Morgenrot archives. The equations referenced barometric pressure algorithms derived from 1944-era German medical notes. A line near the end mentioned application to orbital re-entry endurance under continuous oxygen modulation. This suggested that the data, born in the atrocities of WWII, had been applied to modern astronautic and high-altitude programs. A cross-reference cited Defense Contract, SPX 4292, which aerospace historians quickly linked to SpaceX's early biomedical research. Collaboration with US defense agencies during the 1990s, the realization was staggering. Traces of Morgenrot had found their way into private sector space medicine. A single PDF within the archive was marked Appendix C, Personnel Legacy Review, contained a table listing names under the heading Active Consultation Group, alongside corporate biomedical, engineers and NASA consultants was one entry that froze every reader. Dr. Heinrich V. Rademacher, technical advisor, posthumous data integration. The notation implied that Rademacher's research notes, recovered from pre-war archives, were still in circulation within classified aerospace programs. Even more unsettling was a secondary annotation, data continuity maintained through digital simulation model. HVR9, cyber forensics later, revealed that HVR9 referred to an artificial intelligence built to emulate the analytical patterns of Rademacher's surviving notes, effectively resurrecting his methodology in algorithmic form. The Nazi scientist who pioneered Morgenrot had, in a digital sense, never died. Dr. Emil Hartmann, now living under protection in Switzerland, broke his silence for the first time. In a confidential interview recorded by the BBC in mid-2027, he confirmed having seen early drafts of the Continuum documentation. It was not a forgery, he said. The same handwriting codes, the same numbering system. They never stopped because they no longer needed human consent. They replaced the subjects with computation. When asked whether Kessler had known about the Continuum stage, Hartmann nodded. She told me the next experiments would not require people in chambers anymore, only data, simulated neurons, digital hypoxia. But it's the same principle. See how far you can push the body, the mind, before collapse. Shortly after the broadcast, Hartmann's statement was discredited by anonymous government sources as fabricated. The recording vanished from the BBC's online archives within hours, replaced by an error page. Independent journalists recovered only the transcript, which included one final remark from Hartmann before the feed ended. Every modern aerospace medicine file built on that foundation carries Morgenroth's fingerprints. Every altitude chamber, every G-tolerance test, every endurance protocol. The numbers never changed, only the names. By autumn 2027, multiple European governments initiated inquiries into wartime data, integration within NATO and US programs. Public attention spiked when a German parliamentary investigation uncovered payment records linking the Bundeswehr's medical research wing to a Denver-based contractor named Novodyne Systems, one of the companies listed in the Continuum Appendix. Novodyne's internal documents referenced legacy physiological frameworks derived from declassified WWII archives. When pressed by the media, the company issued a single statement. All inherited research conforms to international bioethics standards. Within weeks, its website was replaced with an under-maintenance notice that never changed. Kessler's personal effects resurfaced in June 2028, when a hiker discovered a waterproof case buried near the Harz Mountains, approximately 20 kilometers from Nordhausen. Inside were her field notes, a compact drive, and a passport that had never been used. The drive contained digitized versions of the Goliath reels and a new recording labeled voicethul.wav. The brief, distorted audio captured a male voice, calm, deliberate, unmistakably German, stating, "Data preserved, Continuum approved, humanity adapts." Spectrographic analysis compared the recording to Rademacher's known voice samples from 1944 radio archives. The match probability exceeded 94%. Whether it was an authentic post-war recording or a reconstructed synthesis remained unproven, but the tone, detached and clinical, carried the weight of an echo that had traveled through time and secrecy alike. As of 2029, the Nordhausen tunnels remain sealed beneath federal jurisdiction. The Thule site has been reclassified under environmental hazard restrictions. The Denver repository stands empty, its inventories transferred to undisclosed locations. Official narratives label the recovered materials as misinterpreted Cold War relics. Yet the Continuum Directive persists online, passed quietly between historians, scientists, and ethicists who see in it not a conspiracy, but a warning. Morgenroth was not a single project. It was a philosophy, the belief that progress justified the shadows behind it. From Nordhausen's frozen corridors to digital algorithms simulating life without conscience, the continuum endures, silent and invisible, beneath the surface of human achievement. The last line of the recovered directive reads, "Data transfer complete, parameters stable." Morgenroth continues,